Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, this one is not going to be long. In fact, it's going to be relatively short. But I wanted to give an update on what was taking place with regards to, I guess, the most up-to-date news with regards to what's taking place with international relations and geopolitical politics. One of the, let me check my sound first. I'm paranoid. I'm sorry. Yeah, they're right. Good. This came out today. In fact, came out maybe an hour or so ago. Right here. Russian Ministry spokesperson Igor Konoshkinov. The Russian Defense Ministry has evidence that Britain had direct involvement in arranging provocation in Duma. We know for certain that between 3 and 6 of April, the so-called White Helmets were seriously pressured from London to speed up the provocation that they were preparing. In one tweet, they've just implicated the UK and the White Helmets. Now, people have had questions about White Helmets for a while, so that's not necessarily insane. And the fact that these groups are being essentially funded by the West, we're funding terrorists, funding White Helmets, we're funding all of these elements, and the only information that we're getting from this are from these sources. Certainly, you can look upon this with a certain amount of skepticism. My point in this is, we know that the United States government has a policy of regime change and wanted to get Bashar al-Assad out of his seat. We know that they've worked tirelessly to get him out that seat, paying terrorists. They called them moderates, but they were paying terrorists across the board. We know the UK was doing the same thing, meaning the UK itself. Look at this. Also, arming terrorists. I don't know if the British citizenry knew that their government and country was doing this, but yes, your country was also using your British pounds to pay terrorists to take down that government. How Britain funded Syria's quote-unquote moderate armed opposition, also known as terrorists with a human face. A document produced last December by the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office headed UK Humanitarian Aid in Response to Syrian Conflict makes interesting reading. The British government, it states, has spent over £100 million since 2012 working closely with a range of actors to provide political solutions to the conflict and prepare to rebuild the country post-Assad. We are paying terrorists for regime change. However you want to coax it, terrorists for regime change. We're doing it. Britain, you're doing it. Now, Russia comes out and says the White Helmets, started by a Brit, the White Helmets, were complicit and working with the British government to do this. Whether you want to say it was staged, whether you want to say it's something actually took place, I don't necessarily care. Don't get me wrong, I care about the human suffering, but I'm making the point that the perception of things that is trying to be created is an event took place where a bunch of people died. Russia is saying it didn't take place, we didn't see it, we've been there, we don't see it. Everybody else, foreign powers, flipping out saying it took place. The information that they're using to indicate that it took place came from sources that were essentially paid for by the US and British governments. The problem with this, the UK and British government was also funding efforts in order to topple the Syrian government. Meaning, if you're paying and you're supporting terrorists in that part of the world to take that government down, you're paying White Helmets and all these other guys to essentially monitor and do whatever White Helmets do in that particular area. And the information that's coming out is coming from one payment source. Meaning, all of the information that's coming out is coming from the people who wanted those governments toppled in the first place. Either the terrorists, the United States, or Britain. You can add in France, because France was also instrumental in toppling Libya, turning that into a dumpster fire. I guess I'm just making this point that people like to just completely discount what Russia is saying here. And I don't quite understand why they do that. If you were a person who was transfixed on the moon and you didn't necessarily have a national identity, and you were looking at what was taking place, and you knew all of the evidence that was provided for you. Now, UK, France, and the United States assert that they have evidence, none shown. I've read article after article after article where these articles are giving the United States and these guys the benefit of the doubt when I have no idea why. No idea why. It's as if the previous history never took place. It's amazing to read propaganda in action. Fact is, if you were born on the moon, if you were looking at the events of Earth, you would say, well, I know they wanted to take him out of his seat. I know they were doing this illegally because nothing in the Constitution said you can fuck around with regime change. So they were behaving illegally. We know that they're in that country illegally. We know that they were literally, for the past several years, Obama wanted Bashar al-Assad out that seat. That British document talks about post-Assad, making the assumption that they would be able to put enough pressure on him for him to leave. How is this in British interest and the United States interest? The interest of the public itself. Not, I don't care about the governments. The public itself. I would heed what Russia is saying here. Whether they're right or wrong, there needs to be an investigation into what's taking place. Even with the investigation, any airstrikes, any attacks on Syria should be off the table. It should be off the fucking table. It doesn't suit us one iota. These guys are doing this because they want regime change. That's the only reason. They were able to get Security Council resolutions against Gaddafi. United States, France, and UK bastardized those things in order to turn that into a policy of regime change. They're trying to do the exact same thing here with Syria. What were the results in Libya? Were those to your liking? I suggest you take a page out of that book to see what they're trying to do in Syria. There needs to be an investigation. I leave it at that. The chemical weapons people are there. Russia is saying it never took place. UK, France, and America are saying it took place. They have no evidence that it took place. They're using the terrorists as evidence, which is really evidence of nothing, seeing as the terrorists themselves have an express interest in making sure that that regime gets taken down. I understand. It only makes sense for the terrorists to have done this. I know some people look at this with skepticism, but I don't understand why they look at this with skepticism. They're facing oblivion. The only reason someone would look at this with skepticism if they themselves couldn't put themselves in a situation where they were in a military situation, they were being obliterated. They're facing death. All of them are about to be obliterated. What are you going to do? You've been in a bloody war for the past several years. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Atrocities have been committed on both sides. And what? You're supposed to get squeamish now? This is a game of goddamn thrones. You are trying to take that country. You have Western powers helping you take that country. You would like to install Sharia law in that country. And the way that you do this, your last instrument, the last brick and stick that you have at your disposal, drop a chemical weapons attack. Or fake one. One or the other. One or the other. And before you say, oh my God, people wouldn't do that. The CIA had planned something like that in Florida when they wanted to create a pretext to go into Cuba. Erdogan just talked about creating a pretext. And then when people heard about it, he flipped out, shut down the internet in the UK because he essentially was talking about a false flag attack in Syria. If your media outlets are looking at this stuff with an overly abundance of skepticism, you are doing a disservice to your audience. That's all I'm saying. It's if you're being objective and fair and you're listening to what these guys are doing, you have to take historical context into account. These things have happened in the past. So looking at this and pretending as if this would never take place, when this has taken place and was even as recently as taken place, at least from the standpoint of Turkey, a few days ago. Governments do this. Countries do this. Not going to keep it so long. I'll put this at the bottom so you can read for yourself. I will also put a Guardian piece. Because, by the way, they're talking about retaliation. They're trying to tamp down fears that they wouldn't necessarily attack the UK. Meaning installations in the UK itself, people are having this conversation of, will the retaliatory strikes hit at UK installations or UK interests? This is where we are. This is where we are. If the United States attacks Syria and kills and murders some Syrians in the process of an illegal war, will the Russians, who would rightfully be in the right at this point, seeing as they're allied with this particular country and they're trying to fight out the terrorists, which in this case is consisting of the United States working with other terrorists, if they retaliate and strike back, will they also be retaliating against British sources? That is literally the conversation that's taking place right now. This is where we are. Congratulations. The lefties who wanted Trump to be more, belligerent. You've got what you wanted. Good job, gold star. Now they're talking about a larger war. Good job. You got your new Cold War. I'll put the Guardian's piece here at the bottom. The Guardian is going, minute by minute by minute at this point. So if there's any new major developments, I'll tune back in. But otherwise, I probably won't see you again until a little bit later this evening. So, all right, guys. Guys, I think what I'm going to do for my show is to have the show in segments in this way. Meaning, essentially do the show throughout the course of the day, and if any breaking stories take place during the evenings. That's a little weird to me. I know, but weird is perspective. Weird is, there's no such thing as really weird per se. It's only relative to other stuff. And since it's only relative to what other people do. But in this case, I'm thinking maybe do the show just through the course of the day. Like I tend to enjoy it. I can work through the day, learn something new, learn something to my audience, essentially educate my audience on something that I'm interested in or something in the process of learning. I think I like that. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I will probably see you guys a little bit later. All right, guys. Have a good one.